Zach, of course, used to work here at the Center for the Book. So he intimately knows the workings of this building and, of course, our author events. And, I'm happy to say maybe at some point in time he was cobbling together some of these wonderful books that he's written at his desk while working here at the Center for the Book as well. Of course, he has written the novels Anointed and Flutter, and the one in my hot little hand, The Weight of Ashes. His new one that is forthcoming is Perfectly Normal, and that's what he will be talking about this evening. He will be joined in conversation by the intelligent and lovely Colleen Oakley, who is a USA Today best-selling author of Before You and I, and the mostly true story of Tanner and Louise. I got hung up on the word true, but since it's fiction, it could be a question about, what is truth, really? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the conversation tonight. I hope you do choose to pick up a pre-signed copy and pre-order of the book. So will you please join me to welcome Zachary Steele and Colleen Oakley.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Can everybody hear okay? Okay, sounds good. I want to start by saying I've been going down a little bit of a Rick Rubin rabbit hole. Do you know who that is? So he's a music producer and he writes a lot about the creative process, and he has a book out called The Creative Act. And his definition of success for artists and writers is when you actually cobble the thing together, be it a song or a book or a painting, and you put it out into the world, and that is success. And so I want to congratulate you on the success of Perfectly Normal.
Thank you.
Finally out in the world tonight.
Thanks.
And I think we're going to start. Do you want to start by saying a little bit about what the book's about and then go into a reading?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So Perfectly Normal is to me, it has a lot of very personal notes to it, but it's about a 16-year-old boy, Nate, who is autistic, but also has chromesthesia. And if you're not familiar with chromesthesia, it's a branch of synesthesia, which is sensory swap. Chromesthesia is seeing colors for sound. And he is an extremely gifted musician. And so when he plays, we get to see the world through his vision of color and how he relates things in life to those colors. And in addition, his family is in a bit of upheaval, and he lives a very structured life that it's something his mother's created for him. It's called the system, and it is the routine of his day that allows him to know what to expect and to be able to plan and to avoid anxiety and meltdowns from indecision and ticking clocks and everything building into panic attacks. And it's a vital part of his life, and everything is going just straight lines until he meets a new student at school, Julian Mack, who opens Nate up to new possibilities. And this allows Nate to branch out and experience life outside the system and outside of what he's used to, ultimately reaching a point where he understands what Nate truly is, what he is fully by himself and not necessarily the child that's been brought up through the system. It's a very long-winded way of getting to it. And there's obviously a lot that happens in there that I don't want to talk about. But I do want to start by introducing you to Nate with a couple of short scenes that I think is about 10 minutes worth of stuff. But when we meet Nate in the book, there's actually one scene first that opens up that we're going to then work toward, but this isn't the second chapter, looking a little back. For his 7th birthday, Nate asked for crayons. When pressed for other gift ideas by his mother, he repeated his wish, stating that he wanted to be able to name the colors. On his birthday, he received a 120 pack of crayons, 6 coloring books, and 2 puzzle books with mazes. Nate immediately emptied the crayons on the family room carpet despite his father's protest. sorting them into color groups in a circle around him, from blues to greens, to yellows, to purples, to reds, to browns, to black, white, and gray. Overwhelmed by the volume of colors, despite the pleasant waxy odor, Nate fidgeted in place, plucking similar shades from each color group, casting them into the box. After reorganizing the remainders, he studied them for 5 minutes, gently humming a repeating scale of notes. His mother offered him the coloring books as he analyzed the crayons, but he shook her off. After several more attempts, his parents watched as he judiciously reduced the circle of crayons to 24. These are the colors, he announced as he handed over the excess, excitement unleashed in a knee-bound bounce and flapping of arms. His enthusiasm met with joy from his mother and frustration from his father, who suggested they take the full 120 count back for a refund so they could buy the 24 pack Nate had unknowingly identified. His mother found an appropriate sized plastic bin for his chosen collection of crayons. Weeks passed as his mother continued to push coloring and puzzle books on Nate. He politely refused with a no thank you every time, honoring his mother's insistence that he always be thankful for the kindness, interest, and ideas of others. Finally, he asked for a piece of black felt and glue so he could place them in order and see them collectively rather than dig them out as needed. Are you sure you want to do that, sweetie? You won't be able to color with them if they're glued to something. Nate wasted little time considering his decision. I don't want to color with them. I want to be able to name the colors. That way I know what color the sounds are. What color what sounds are? What do you mean, honey? The colors, when there's sound. Your voice is a blue-green, of course, which makes sense. That's my favorite color. His mother waffled between confusion and concern, landing instead upon the absolute joy that she was her son's favorite anything, which only served to demonstrate to Nate for the first time in his life that identifying sound by its color wasn't something everyone did. What seemed perfectly normal became abnormal and odd, especially when his father learned about it. For Christmas that year, his mother bought Nate a square black frame shadow box and encouraged him to display his crayons on the wall in his room. Despite his father's protests, Nate was overjoyed and pleaded for his help in hanging the crayons on the wall above the headboard of his bed. It hung there for 5 years. On his 13th birthday, against his mother's wishes, he took it down to appease his father, who insisted that teenage boys didn't have crayons, much less crayons displayed in a box above their bed. When his father brought an empty box to his room to donate the shadow box and other childhood items, such as a few stuffed animal friends he'd had for years, Nate put the shadow box at the bottom, layering it with stuffed animals and clothes he'd grown out of. Once his father left the room, Nate dug out the shadow box and hid it under his bed, surrounded by the few stuffed animals he wanted to keep. It wasn't the most perfect hiding places, but his quick action without argument seemed to convince his father that Nate was on board. It was unlikely he'd ever check. He rarely came into the room as it was. To ensure the matter went uninvestigated, Nate sealed up the box and handed them to his mother within earshot of his father, announcing the donations were ready to be taken away. His mother never checked the contents, taking them immediately to the trunk of her car without question. At dinner that night, she told Nate she dropped it off at Goodwill. His father was pleased. It was never brought up again, even when his mother checked under his bed later in the week, supposedly looking for more laundry. When she stood, she smiled, winked, and left the room with his laundry basket. Though he had long since memorized the colors, incorporating them into his daily life, into the classical and orchestral works he found great joy in, there was something symbolic and important about keeping the crayons, about the subterfuge, about his connection to his mother, to his past, to the day he realized he wasn't like everyone else, the day he realized he wasn't normal. His mother's color was blue-green. His father's was red-orange. Nate looked for both everywhere, in every sound, every voice, incorporating one family of colors while avoiding the other. Right. And then we're going to move to Nate as we find him through the book, waking up into the system. The alarm sounded at precisely 7 a.m. Nate silenced it with a blind tap, following with another to the static track of a white noise machine. The room filled with sound, birds chirping, a car driving by the front of the house, his mother in the kitchen washing dishes, the rattle of the vent cover as the heater warmed the room. 1 minute later, timed by 10 slow breaths of 6 seconds each, Nate sat up and opened his eyes. From the distance to each sound, the white wall ahead, framed by a gurgling 55-gallon aquarium atop a rustic oak hutch, remained clear. Any spike in the volume of those sounds, such as the clink of dishes against one another or a loud tailpipe of a passing truck, registered as a muted flash of color. Nate took 2 minutes to enjoy the calm, considering the day's schedule, while following the paths of the two discus fish that had been his roommates and friends for 4 years. Watching them swim gave life to a wide smile. Good morning, Sebastian. Good morning, Wolfgang. I'm sorry to say it's back to school for me today. Winter break is over. Be grateful that your biggest concern is the level of poop you have to swim through. I'm not sure either of you would enjoy school. That is to say, school as an education, not the group that you swim in. You probably would prefer that to being in a tank. With a simple laugh, Nate rose, stretched, and lowered to a seat on the worn beige carpet. Even though Sebastian and Wolfgang were the closest thing to pets they had ever owned, Nate insisted friends should never be considered pets. It had always smelled of dog. His parents claimed they couldn't smell it, but he could. He always could. From underneath the bed, he moved Mulligan, the stuffed hound, and Jerry, the giraffe, aside to reveal his black frame shadow box. It slid easily, its distance from the bed measured perfectly to allow the square box to fit between his legs and the dangling gray curtain of bed sheets. The set of crayons looked as new as the day they were placed behind the glass. Neatly lined in 4 rows of 6, the lead position was taken by indigo, the color Nate had always loved the most. From there, they moved through the blues, then greens to yellows and orange, then reds to gray, white, brown, and black. In truth, his preference would have been to place the reds last, ending in red-orange, but the transition of colors would have been disrupted, chaotic. Nate ran his fingers along the frame as he focused on the range of blues to greens for a minute. Studying the color brought a sense of calm, a center to begin his day. He exhaled, then returned the box to its safe place, the guardian duo of Mulligan and Jerry back on duty at the front, sides and rear guarded by other fuzzy family members still in hiding. 5 minutes into his day, he gave himself over to the system. After feeding Sebastian and Wolfgang a teaspoon of fish flakes, as instructed by the container, Nate collected a pile of folded clothes off his dresser, chosen the night before. Long sleeve white and royal blue striped golf shirt, the darker jeans that fit loose against his bony legs and waist, knee-high tube socks with the royal stripes, and snug solid blue underwear. All would go well with the denim jacket with the gray cotton sleeves and hoodie. Much as she had with the system in general, his mother implemented the selection of clothes the night before to help alleviate the anxiety brought on by indecision against the pressure of a ticking clock. After all, choosing clothes was a process. It took time. His mother said it was an important part of the system that helped him to keep calm and focused, so Nate relied upon it. Clothes in hand, it was time to move on to the next stage of the system. An impossible task as it happened, as the sky blue shoes were not on the shelf in the closet where they belonged. They were gone, not in his room. Pressure tightened in his chest, the search for his shoes bordering on frantic. They were supposed to be there. They were always supposed to be there. That was the system. Clothes on the dresser, shoes on a vertical shelf just inside the closet, the sky blue in their place at the top, indicating favorite status. Nate's mind whirred, trying to remember where he'd seen them last. How could he have gone to sleep without ensuring they weren't where they should have been? Stupid, stupid, stupid. Nate's hand flexed, tight around the folded clothes, breath drawing in rapid bursts. He was losing valuable time. The system required everything to go as planned, or there wouldn't be enough time to practice his piece on the keyboard. He only had 25 minutes as it was. He needed his mother. She could figure it out. She could make it right. No. Nate pushed it away, determined to figure it out on his own. His mother called it self-management, an effort on his part to learn how to manage disruptions in routine, to stave off meltdowns when she wasn't there to assist. Under his breath, Nate worked through it, pacing the floor of the room, one hand tight to the back of his neck. Shoes. Where are my shoes? Where are they? I had them. I wore them yesterday. Yesterday. I had them yesterday. They should be here. They must have been here last night. Except they couldn't have been, his mother's voice replied within, or they would be here now. Blue-green, calming, centered. Think. Nate closed his eyes. Okay, think. If they were here last night, I would see them now, so they couldn't have been here. That checks out. So I must have forgotten to look last night, just like the last time they weren't here, when they were in the family room where I took them off, when Dad said he was tired of picking them up. Oh, right. Nate rushed to the closed door, hand tight on the knob, a risen voice beyond forcing him to a stop, an inch parted from the door frame. Pops of his father's red-orange fired against the white wooden surface of the door, followed by a series of blue-greens from his mother's sharp reply. They were fighting. Again. About him. Again. No.
So I want to begin with I think my initial question was, where did you come up with the idea for this? The chromesthesia, is that something that you've had experience with? And just talk a little bit about that, how you came up with the idea for the book.
No, I actually originally didn't plan on chromesthesia to be part of the story at all. It was just something that as I began to develop the idea of this character that was musically gifted, that I don't know, I read something about it and visually it struck me. It was just such a I don't know if it's cool for the people that see colors all the time, but it seemed cool to me. It seemed like something that would be really fun to incorporate in the character. And then as I continued to research chromesthesia, I found out that though it isn't common for autistics to have various forms of synesthesia, the percentage is actually kind of low, that the percentage of people who have synesthesia that are autistic is closer to 20%. And so I started thinking about that, and it became something that seemed important to his journey, and also something that I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to be able to frame through a character that showcased, rather than the stereotypical or negative sides of autism, just really embraced the joy that comes with being autistic, and how that manifests itself. And through music and through his actions, it felt like a perfect marriage.
Yeah. The thing that struck me most about this book when I read it is that the characters really, really come alive. Like I was in, and you can tell probably from the reading, like you're just in Nate's head. And I want to know, as a writer, how do you do that? And really, how do you embody your characters as you write? And particularly for a young boy. I mean, you were a young
I was
boy
one of
once.
those. Yes, I was.
You reached back.
I think I may still be at times, but characters are actually, there's two parts of writing and storytelling that are vital to me, and I will obsess over. One is world building, which is literally creating the world that your characters live in, whether it's fantasy world, real world, it doesn't matter, and all the dynamics that are in play there. But characters are the other part, because I want them to be that way. And the only way to make them that way is to actually do the work to understand their motivations, to understand what they believe about themselves versus what they actually need to become a better and more full person. And so I will do a lot of work to try to develop what the character is, and then through the story, I will let their actions kind of teach me more, and I will go back and incorporate a lot more of that into edits.
Yeah.
But
So talk about the research a little bit as far as, understanding chromesthesia and autism and all of the things that you had to understand to make the character of Nate come alive.
chromesthesia is a fun one because I went down the rabbit hole, the YouTube rabbit hole. And I was like, chromesthesia, tell me everything. And so I watched video after video, and I came across this young woman named Colleen Oakley, Hova, and she is a musician who is, she says she's a synesthesia, but she talks specifically about chromesthesia, which is something that she experiences. And was fascinated by her videos, and she and her husband even did a demonstration that was really cool. And she has this violin that lights up, with different colors, and she plays different notes just to kind of give you a visual of the different colors. But you can only learn so much. She had a couple of TED Talks that I loved, and I really, really enjoyed, but you can only learn so much from those. And so, I'm a writer, so I'm like, well, just send an email. I mean, what's the worst she can say is nothing or just not respond. And so I sent an email, and she said nothing for 7 days, and I kind of forgot about it. And then I got an email from her, and I had mentioned in there that, as far as the research for chromesthesia, and then I'll apply this to autism as well, that it was very important for this, especially the autism, to portray this in an authentic way, to not fall into stereotypical tropes and to just play off characters that I've seen on screen before, because they've all been very flawed. Not all of them, but they've been better lately, but so many of them have been flawed. And so I sent her the email that was like, I want to be able to portray this authentically and love to be able to have a conversation. So ended up having a very long conversation with her, and talking about chromesthesia. And the first thing she said to me is actually something very similar that you hear about autism. Like, it was the line is, if you know one autism person, you know one autistic person. You know, that everybody experiences things differently. And she said that about chromesthesia. But listening to her describe how it manifests helped me to be able to create a way that I did it for Nate. And if you remember the days of screensavers, I describe it that way. It's like for him, it starts up in the left-hand corner and kind of moves, you know, in this periphery, not behind people, obviously, but just right in front of everything that he sees. And it just moves to here, and then it starts back up here again. And it will just be a series of colors for particular notes, merging depending on the sound. Voices are a little more touchy because they have such very cadence. So I just kind of went straight forward with every person has their own color to their voice. But yeah, I tried to do my research and talk to the right people. And you know, autism, I have a very personal connection to that, and that assisted me in doing research as well. And so I hope what I ended up with, and I believe what I ended up with, was an authentic portrayal. But
Well, I had to think.
thank you.
Music is a hugely important part of this book, obviously, in Nate's life. So I want you to talk a little bit about music in your life, either artistically. Are you musically gifted? Do you play?
I played piano when I was a kid, and I was really good in it. I picked the Moonlight Sonata because I was telling Jess today. The very last piece that I was learning on the piano was Moonlight Sonata, and I was almost finished with it. And I was pretty good. I mean, we had musical talent in our family. It's just I didn't have that passion to follow, you know, learning instruments and everything. So I moved on to baseball and writing, and I have stayed there ever since. um, but um, but but music has always been extremely important to me, and what I wanted with Nate's journey is I wanted him to be able to have the transformative experience of being a teenager learning to be an adult through music. And so there's so many other things that are happening to him in the story, but at the core of this, Nate's life is his music. He does have friends, but his life and his passion, his special interest is his music, and he immerses himself in it. So um, he has this opportunity to learn more about music beyond the classical and orchestral pieces that are his life. And as he begins his journey through varying artists and styles of music, his perspective on not just the world around him, but of himself begins to transform. And so it was very important for me to use that musical thread because it was so important to my journey as a teen.
Yeah, that's great. Um, you know, what's interesting to me, or what was interesting to me about this book, is what I took away from it. One of the things I took away from it is that, you know, while it's Nate's journey and it's very specific to who he is, it's a very common journey too when we're coming of age, right? And we realize that the life that we had and that our parents, you know, the systems that our parents give us, that there's so much more out there when you meet new people and you have new experiences. And so it's so relatable. And while what he's going through is so unique, it's also perfectly normal, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious what you hope. Is that what you hope people take away from the book? Are there other things that you hope people take away?
Well, I would kind of twist that a little bit into, again, playing off of that stereotype of what an autistic is and what their life is like. And you know, being autistic does not negate having a very typical path to
Right.
growth. And I wanted to be able to establish what his life was within the structure that was necessary for him as an autistic, but also allow him to experience the same journey that we all experience. So yeah, I do hope that people see that and begin to understand that being autistic doesn't mean that you're on a completely different path as everybody else. It means you're taking the same path in a very different way. And I think there's this level of acceptance and empathy that we need to have, and that we need to see in autistics, that I hope also translates through.
Well, you mentioned world building a little earlier on, and I know that this book is set in the same town as Weight of Ashes. So why did you choose to do that? Can we expect that from future books as well?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the idea of place as a character. And I grew up in a small town, Florida, and then in Georgia. And so Weight of Ashes was in 1989, and it's a very different world for a small town then. But I want to experience this town through varying periods. And so Weight of Ashes was 1989, Perfectly Normal was 2016. So you get to see 25 years of difference between where Hogan, the fictional town of Hogan, Georgia was, and where it is now. And it also gives me plenty of room to drop little Easter eggs in there for people who have read The Weight of Ashes. And you don't need to have read The Weight of Ashes, don't get me wrong, but you should. Also a good one. But I wanted to be able to do that. And yes, the next book I have in line for this publisher actually takes place in the same town a couple of years later.
That's awesome. Can you give any more about the book?
Oh, about the other book?
Yeah.
The right now I'm calling it Home, and it's about there are 5 siblings total. 4 of them are coming back to Hogan, Georgia, because their mother is being shifted into last stages hospice. And so you have the whole family coming back together at a time of crisis and eventually grief and loss. And though I wanted to play off of the dynamic of family and siblings and how difficult both of those are, the real thing, apparently I wanted to define normal and perfectly normal, and now I seem to want to define home. So I love definitions, apparently. Hogan and definitions, this is my thing. But yeah, it's about trying to understand what home is to each of these people.
I love that. That sounds so good. This is more of a selfish question. I always want to ask other writers about your process. I think secretly, because I feel like it's going to inform my process. Like you must have the secret or the trick.
I don't have 4 kids, so I don't know if I can help you with that. I do have one that sometimes feels like 1.5, but yeah, no, I mean, my process is somewhat unpredictable, and largely that's because of running Broadleaf, the writing organization that I run.
Which it's Giving Tuesday, so make sure you donate.
It is Giving Tuesday, so if you feel like donating to Broadleaf Writers Association, broadleafwriters.com. Wonderful prizes that you can win, including signed copies of Weight of Ashes. So, no, so I write it first, and I hate that. I want that structured everyday kind of thing, but it just hasn't been consistent enough for me. So like Perfectly Normal was this weird thing. Please, for anybody who writes, never do this. I wrote like 90% of this book over one 6-week period here and one 6-week period there.
Oh my God.
And then kind of filled in the gap in between. And then
did you ever see him in those 6 weeks?
I did it during the day. That was when, because what I have to do at that point is I have to pick, and I picked 2 times of the year when things are the slowest for Broadleaf, so that I could literally just say, okay, everything that is Broadleaf comes after. And if I don't get to it,
right.
I mean, it's one of those things. And I kind of have to do it that way because once I start working, I can be singularly focused, and then 4 hours is gone, and I've lost my chance to write. So I am not a get up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning to write person, because as Jess can attest, I have a process. I have my own routine that is get up, get my coffee, check the news, and read all the things that I want to read, be left alone for an hour, lest we get grumpy. And then we can face the day. So usually if I'm going to write, it's going to be right.
Yeah. Do you plot an outline? Do you?
I'm always working in my head.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's one of those things where I always joke about the whole do you outline or do you not pants versus plotting.
Yeah.
Because anybody who says that they pants is really actually unaware that they're outlining in their heads.
Right. They're
And
just
that
not writing it
they're
down.
just not writing it down. It's like, I know where my end is. Well, then you've outlined something.
Yeah.
But no, I'm always, when I'm alone, I tend to walk in circles around the house, talking to myself about the stories, and or if I'm in the car, I'm talking about my stories. Not when there's somebody there, obviously, because that would be rude. I would be fine with like talking about it, but it's just rude. But yeah, so I feel like I'm always working, and I've always got notebooks, and I'm always putting things into a note file or something like that. So I feel like on some level I'm always working, but I'm just not always writing notes.
Yeah. How do you know when an idea is going to become a book?
Usually when I've written it and my now publisher says yes. I don't know. I have written a number of books that didn't become published books.
Yes.
I thought they were
Yes,
going
are
to
they
become.
maybe? Okay.
No, probably not. For reasons.
Right.
I like to think at this stage in my writing career that I understand the craft and story well enough to know what needs to be done,
Right.
and that I know if I've messed that up, it's not going to work.
Right.
I know even with Perfectly Normal, when I sent in the first third of the book, the first thing I got back with was that's not really working. And so I had to go back and fix some things, but which is fine because I was, early, it wasn't even a complete draft.
Right.
But so there's just two answers to that. There's where I was and where I am now. I'd like to think that what I'm creating now is going to be published.
Yeah.
But who knows? If you can find out that answer, you'll make a lot of money.
I always
I
ask.
always ask, see in case somebody has that answer.
Right. I'd love to open it up to the floor. If that's okay. And see if anybody else has questions about writing or this book or anything else.
Yes, sir. That I don't know.
What did you mean when you said you write in verse?
When I write in verse?
No.
I didn't say that.
I heard it too.
Oh, really? I don't know. I'll ask myself later.
Recorded, so we're gonna.
No, wait. I said I write in verse. Oh, sorry. I just got it. Boom, there it is. Sorry, I don't write in verse. No, I don't know what that means. Don't do it.
I have no further questions.
The verse. I will know not to use that word next time, or to really land on the beat.
Their question.
Yes.
I may be wrong, but I'm assuming that in the world of autism, that there are all sorts of like special interest advocacy groups, educational, rental, medical, and did they factor how did they factor into what you produce, or did they not?
You mean like organizations that exist to help autistic people, or?
Well, I mean, parents, I'm sure that,
I mean, there are definitely advocacy there.
Rental groups that.
Yeah, I mean,
That advocate and medical and educational.
yeah, I mean, I can't profess to know all of them, but there are definitely advocacy groups that exist.
Yeah.
And I would like to learn more about them. I don't know. So I wouldn't say that there's anything in that would have factored into what I was writing, because I was very much focused on the individual experience. Though I will acknowledge that his mother, Nell, could use one of those advocacy groups for sure.
And I think like in researching, I think he's asking more about researching. Like, so you followed more autistic adults mostly than groups.
Yeah, that's true. That you're talking in terms of the research and everything for the book. Yeah, I did follow. There are a rising number of really fantastic autistic social media accounts on any of the platforms. And yeah, I did begin to collect those and follow them and watch reels and listen to experience. I mean, I between chromesthesia and autism, I watched, I don't know, dozens of just personal interviews of people talking about their experiences. And that did factor
That's what I was wondering.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. Yeah.
How you think something, it's not a necessary, or maybe as far as I know, not a direct experience. Wrong.
Right. No, my experience is not Nate's experience for sure. And I definitely wanted to be able to again portray Nate and his experiences in a very authentic way. So I did try to channel as much that of what I learned through reading and conversations and interviews and TED Talks and talking to the people that I think. Yes, sir.
Did anything during the writing of this really surprise you and come out of nowhere? I mean, it's kind of more of a pantsing and plotting question, but did he take over in your head and surprise you as a character?
I mean, I feel like oftentimes, probably going back to the character thing, I do immerse myself in the characters enough that I am often surprised by things that they say or things that they do. With Nate in particular, and it's kind of fitting. Everything was so structured that that nothing that he did necessarily surprised me, though his voice seemed to be a very natural thing that I didn't have to look for. And that kind of surprised me because sometimes it's tough to find that voice of the character, especially when you're dealing with a character who is monotone in nature and oftentimes not really emotional in terms of expression. So I was actually kind of surprised how organically he came to life on the page.
Well, it's always my favorite question.
Yes, sir.
Since, and you would have been asked. And since you do a lot of world building, darlings you have to kill. In one book. They go to the drawers, they go in the file, they are pop back up, since you are. So what's setting these books in the same channel?
I haven't had any that I've had to put to rest that came back yet. In this particular book, I didn't have to, excise anybody from it, but I did have to significantly change some backgrounds from multiple characters. And so in some context there, I effectively killed the character that they were and had to create a new one in their place. But I'm more of if I write something and remove entire sections out, I will save that file just in case I want to use it or describe something, use a description from it again another time. But to this point in my writing career, I've never removed a character and never brought them back to anything else. It's like, you're dead to me. You're dead to me. Sorry. Any other questions? Yes.
Is Nate a character that you think you could develop beyond the script?
I don't think I would ever close the door to writing about a character in this Hoganverse, as I will now call it. Again, as is evident by just the little things that I like to drop and have dropped in now working on the third book. It would be interesting to see where Nate goes from here. But I think the only way I would do that is if somehow this thing sold a whole lot of copies and people wanted more, or B, I just really had a great story that felt necessary to tell. Otherwise, it's very likely that Nate would just show up somewhere in another story and then that seems over and he's gone. Just because I get to do that in this structure. But yeah, I thought about that today. I thought, what if I was going to tell a different story about him, what stage of his life would I want to visit? I don't know. But I like this version. And I really hope that if you read the book, and for those who do read the book, that you find that connection with him and with his friends. We haven't even talked about his friends. He has this great collection of friends. His best friend is Michelle, who he's known since they were in diapers. And she is, as she puts it, a proud Southern Amazonian Baptist woman. I think that was how it goes. She is curly red hair. She is fiery personality. She is extremely intelligent. And she is the one person other than his mother that truly gets him and understands him and is there for him. And they have a wonderful code of looks and taps that she's developed to help him understand social cues that he's going to miss, and moments when he needs to like, nope, be quiet. And of course, there's Julian Mack that he meets, who is flame. I guess I would call him flamboyant in personality. And he's very well put together. He's very well spoken. He's a new student. He connects with Nate immediately, and Nate connects with him immediately. Julian is gay, so there's exploration of whether or not Nate's feeling anything there. And then Julian has his secrets. You know, Julian has his self that he presents. It's kind of a version of Nate in a neurotypical way, because you know, it's very much about wearing masks and what you hide from people. And then there are other people, of course, his mother Nell and father Charlie. I have 4 points of view. I have Nate, Michelle, Nell, and Charlie. And his parents, I chose their POV because on one hand you have the mother, who is the advocate and creator of the system, and the one that's always been there for Nate and understands Nate and is trying to help him learn how to function. And it's a part of the autistic experience that isn't really spoken about as much.
Right.
You don't really get to see what it's like to be a parent of an autistic child. And at the same time, she's dealing with a husband, and not much of a spoiler because it's part of the write-up, is it? That they're arguing obviously in the scene, and they're going to go through a separation that further tests Nate, but also tests the boundaries of her acceptance and his lack of it. So yeah, so there are a lot of great characters other than his music teacher, Miss Davenport, who I love, and so many more. So yeah, I don't know. That's where I went with the other characters, but I do hope that you enjoy Nate and his experience and his friends and his family, and that's all I got.
I mean, like I said earlier, these characters genuinely feel like they could walk off the page and like, you know, that you did it so well. Kudos to you.
Appreciate that.
Yes, another question.
You mentioned that it takes place in the same town as Wade Dash is living in the third. Wade Dash is thinking.
Well, I think you might have to read the book to find out. I can tell you that there are no characters that make an appearance in major roles. And by major roles, I define that as taking up a large portion of the book. You know, we have our 4 main points of view. None of them were in the weight of actions. But I will tell you that there are plenty of small bits to bigger bits that I had fun putting in. And there was one surprise, actually, now that I think about it, which wasn't a Nate specific thing, but it was more like, oh, wait, you're connected to this person. Well, I didn't think about that. So that was fun. That was a fun discovery. But yeah, if you read The Weight of Ashes and you remember all the characters from it, you will see familiar things.
Love that. I'm sure we'll see familiar things in homes.
Yes, you will. Yeah, I already have.
That's so fun.
I already have one of them planned in there. So it's a fun thing. It's not quite the Marvel universe, but it's fun.
Not yet.
Not yet, right? It's the Hogan verse. What's next?
Any other questions?
All right. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank Colleen, because not only did she give me an awesome blurb for this book, but for taking the time to come over here away from her very busy family and to ask me questions.
It's my honor to do it, and I hope everybody buys this book. Like I said in the beginning, you have done the successful part,
Mhm.
but now you guys need to do the successful part of the business part of it,
That's true.
buying the book.
That's true. That does help. That does. And as we mentioned before, the books may not be here, but you can actually pay for it. It'll be shipped to you later this week, with whatever inscriptions you want in it, personalizations you want in it. And also to let you know, there is an ebook available, and this one has an audio book, with a very fabulous job done by Tyler Buron that he brought such great life
You
to.
do all four of
Oh,
them?
he did all of them.
Wow.
And he
that's
did,
impressive.
he did such a wonderful job with Nate. And he was very Southern with Michelle. We tried to get it focused, but he did a fabulous job. And I couldn't be more proud of having it. So, all right. Well, thank you all for coming. And I'll be back there.